The air in the conference room on the 47th floor of Pierce Technologies tasted like expensive coffee and impending disaster. Rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Manhattan into an impressionist painting of blurred lights and gray shadows. The fluorescent bulbs overhead hummed with the kind of persistent drone that burrowed into your skull after hours of corporate warfare. And Claire Margan had been at war since 2 o'clock. It was now 4:47 on a Friday that refused to end. She stood at the head of the glass table, her worn blazer, the good one, the one without a coffee stain hidden under the lapel, feeling thinner with every passing second. 12 pairs of eyes tracked her movement as she advanced to the next slide in her presentation. 12 people who could decide whether she ate next month or joined the ranks of the unemployed in a city that devoured the weak. Her presentation was good. She knew it was good. 3 months of 18-hour days, of sacrificing sleep and sanity, of missing Tyler's calls because she was drowning in market research and demographic analysis. The campaign she'd designed for Pierce Technologies' new AI product line was innovative, targeted, and exactly what they needed to dominate the fourth quarter. At least it had been good until Victoria Ashworth decided otherwise. "I'm sorry, Claire," Victoria said, her voice dripping with a concern so artificial it could have been bottled and sold as imitation vanilla. "But I have some concerns about these projections." Claire's fingers tightened imperceptibly around the presentation remote. Victoria Ashworth, VP of Operations, 42 years old and sharp as a surgical blade, sat 3 seats down from the head of the table. Her platinum hair was scraped back into a chignon so severe it could have been classified as a weapon. Diamond studs glittered in her ears, the real kind, the kind that cost more than Claire's annual rent. "What concerns?" Claire asked, keeping her voice level, professional, giving away nothing of the panic beginning to claw at her chest. "Well," Victoria said, leaning forward with the posture of someone about to deliver a killing blow disguised as constructive criticism, "the demographic targeting seems derivative. I'm seeing a lot of overlap with the campaign Natalie presented last quarter." Claire's stomach dropped. Natalie Cross, her former colleague, her former friend, her current source of professional paranoia. "That's because Natalie and I collaborated on the preliminary research," Claire explained, hearing the defensive edge creeping into her tone and hating herself for it. "But the strategic direction is completely different. If you look at slide 12... "I've looked at all the slides, dear," Victoria interrupted, the endearment landing like a slap. "And I've also looked at these." She slid a folder across the table. It landed in front of Claire with a sound like a judge's gavel. Inside were printed emails, Claire's name in the sender field, Natalie's name in the recipient line. Messages discussing campaign ideas, strategic approaches, creative directions. Nothing unusual, nothing incriminating, except the dates were wrong. "These emails show you appropriating Natalie's ideas and presenting them as your own," Victoria said, addressing the room now, not Claire. "A pattern of intellectual theft spanning the last 6 months." "That's not. Those dates are." Claire's mind raced, trying to process what she was seeing. The content was real, conversations she and Natalie had actually had. But the timestamps were altered, rearranged, taken out of context to paint a picture of plagiarism instead of collaboration. She'd been set up. The realization hit her like ice water. Natalie had been feeding Victoria ammunition, carefully curated to destroy her credibility at the exact moment she was most vulnerable. "I can explain," Claire started, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. "I'm sure you can," Victoria said smoothly, "but the evidence speaks for itself." The room had gone silent, the kind of silence that preceded an execution. That's when the door opened. Jonathan Pierce entered like winter wind made flesh, sudden, cold, impossible to ignore. The room's atmosphere shifted immediately, 12 bodies straightening in their chairs, 12 faces rearranging themselves into expressions of attentive professionalism. Claire had seen him before, of course, You didn't work at Pierce Technologies without knowing what the founder looked like. But she'd never been in the same room with him, never felt the weight of her presence pressing against her like a physical force. He was tall, well over 6 feet, moving with the kind of controlled precision that suggested every gesture was calculated. His suit was dark enough to be called black, but expensive enough to actually be charcoal, tailored so perfectly it seemed like a second skin. Dark hair, almost black, styled with casual perfection. And eyes, she noticed his eyes even from across the room. Steel gray, the color of storm clouds, sharp and assessing as they swept across the space. He took the seat at the head of the table without greeting anyone, without apology for his lateness. Because men like Jonathan Pierce didn't apologize. The world adjusted to them, not the other way around. "Continue," he said, his voice low and smooth, a sound like expensive whiskey poured over ice. Claire's mouth had gone dry. She pulled her gaze away from him, tried to remember where she'd been in her presentation before Victoria's ambush. Miss Morgan was just addressing some concerns about her campaign's originality, Victoria supplied helpfully, poisonously. Jonathan's eyes moved to Claire. She felt pinned by that gaze, like a butterfly mounted to a board. He said nothing, waiting. "The concerns are based on a misunderstanding," Claire said, forcing strength into her voice she didn't feel. "The emails Miss Ashworth referenced are taken out of context. Natalie Cross and I collaborated on preliminary research, which is standard procedure. The strategic direction I'm proposing is entirely distinct." "Is it?" Jonathan asked. The question was so simple, so direct, it felt like a trap. Claire made herself hold his gaze. "Yes." "Then what's the fatal flaw in your campaign?" The room went silent again, but this was a different kind of silence, confused. No one asked a presenter to critique their own work. It violated every rule of corporate theater. But Claire understood what he was doing, testing her, seeing if she could be honest even when honesty might destroy her. She took a breath. The budget allocation for social media advertising is aggressive to the point of recklessness. If engagement rates don't meet projections in the first 2 weeks, we'll have burned through 60% of our quarterly marketing spend with minimal return. It's a gamble. Something flickered in Jonathan's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "And why did you include such a reckless gamble in your proposal?" "Because playing it safe means losing market share to our competitors who aren't afraid to take risks. Sometimes reckless is the only rational choice." For 3 seconds, Jonathan Pierce looked at her like she was the only person in the room, like he was seeing past the worn blazer and the desperation she was trying so hard to hide, seeing something that interested him. Then he looked at Victoria. "Your recommendation?" Victoria's smile was triumphant. "Immediate termination. This kind of intellectual dishonesty can't be tolerated." Claire's world tilted. The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. "Mr. Pierce, if I could just," she started. "Security will escort you out," Jonathan said, his voice as cold and impersonal as a recorded message. "Effective immediately." He stood, buttoned his suit jacket with efficient, final movements, and walked out of the conference room without looking back. The whole thing had taken less than 3 minutes. 3 minutes to destroy a career, a livelihood, a future. Claire stood frozen as a security guard appeared in the doorway. The other board members avoided her eyes, already moving on to the next agenda item. Victoria's expression was serene, satisfied, the look of someone who'd just won a game Claire hadn't known she was playing. The walk through the office was a nightmare, rendered in fluorescent lighting and pitying stares. Everyone knew. Of course everyone knew. Gossip traveled at light speed in corporate environments, faster than email, faster than thought. Her belongings fit into a single cardboard box. 3 years of work reduced to a coffee mug with a chipped handle, a framed photo of Tyler at his high school graduation, a sweater she kept in her desk drawer for when the air conditioning ran too cold. Natalie stood by the elevators, her expression a careful mask of sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, Claire," she said. "I had to tell the truth." Claire didn't respond. She didn't trust herself to speak without screaming. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside, cold and punishing, soaking through her blazer in seconds. November in New York, the kind of weather that matched the bleakness pressing down on her chest. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Tyler's name lit up the screen. "Hey, did you send the tuition payment? The bursar's office is saying they haven't received it yet, and the deadline is Monday." Claire closed her eyes, rain streaming down her face, mixing with tears she refused to acknowledge. She'd been planning to make that payment today, after work, after her presentation secured her position and her quarterly bonus, after she was safe. She was 28 years old, unemployed, with $73 in her checking account, and a brother depending on her to keep the promise she'd made over their parents' graves 3 years ago. Tyler would finish college. Tyler would have the future their parents had wanted for him, no matter what it cost her. A car pulled up beside her. Sleek, black, expensive, a Mercedes with windows tinted dark enough to hide secrets. The back window rolled down with a smooth electronic hum. Jonathan Pierce looked out at her from the warm, dry interior. "Get in, Miss Morgan," he said. "I have a proposition for you." Claire stood there, dripping, shivering. Her entire world had collapsed in the span of an hour. Pride warred with desperation. Dignity fought necessity. "You just fired me," she said, her voice raw. "I know," he replied, his expression unreadable. "That's why you're going to say yes to what I'm about to offer." The rain pounded down harder. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city. Claire Morgan opened the car door and got in. The interior of the Mercedes smelled like leather and expensive cologne, a scent Claire couldn't identify, but that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. She slid across the seat, leaving a trail of rainwater on upholstery that was undoubtedly worth more than her entire wardrobe. The door closed with a solid final sound that seemed to seal her inside a different world, one of heated seats and soundproofed silence. Jonathan Pierce sat across from her, perfectly dry, perfectly composed. Between them stretched enough space for propriety, but the car suddenly felt impossibly small. "Reeves, drive," he said to the man behind the wheel. The driver, somewhere in his 50s with silver hair and kind eyes that met Claire's briefly in the rearview mirror, pulled smoothly into traffic without a word. Claire realized she was shivering. From cold or shock or the sheer insanity of getting into a car with the man who just destroyed her career, she couldn't tell. Probably all three. "You're going to want to hear what I have to say before you speak," Jonathan said, his tone suggesting this was advice, not a command, though the effect was the same. Claire bit back the 7 different responses fighting for dominance in her throat and waited. He reached into his jacket, Italian, she noticed now, the kind of tailoring that whispered rather than shouted wealth, and withdrew a thin folder, not the one Victoria had used to execute her, a different one. "I need a wife," he said, as casually as someone might say they needed a coffee. Temporarily, for occurrences. Of all the things Claire had been expecting, this wasn't among them. She stared at him, wondering if the stress of the day had finally snapped something important in her brain. "I'm sorry? What?" "A business arrangement," Jonathan continued, ignoring her disbelief. "There's a hostile takeover attempt on Pierce Technologies. The board believes I'm too unstable, too unmarried, too much of a risk to lead the company through a merger. They want someone settled, reliable, married." "So get married," Claire said, her voice sharper than intended. "To whom?" "Every woman in my social circle wants either my money or my name, usually both. I need someone who understands this is a transaction, nothing more." The car glided through rain-slicked streets, the city passing by in streaks of neon and shadow. Claire's mind raced, trying to find the logic in this absurdity. Why me? "Because you're honest enough to admit your own mistakes. I watched you in that boardroom. You could have lied, deflected, blamed Natalie. Instead, you pointed out the flaw in your own campaign before I could. He paused, something almost like respect flickering across his features. And because you has everything to lose, which means you won't betray me. The truth of that statement landed like a punch. He'd seen through her immediately, seen the desperation she'd been trying so hard to mask. What exactly are you proposing? Jonathan opened the folder, revealing a contract. Even upside down, Claire could see it was thorough. 6 months of marriage, public appearances as needed. You'll live in my penthouse, attend events, play the role of devoted wife. In exchange, you'll receive $500,000 at the end of the term. Claire's breath caught. $500,000. Tyler's tuition paid in full, the medical bills from her parents' accident, the ones that still arrived like clockwork to remind her of everything she'd lost, her own student loans, all of it, gone. Plus an immediate advance of $50,000 for expenses, Jonathan added, watching her face carefully. $50,000. The tuition payment Tyler needed by Monday. The rent she was 3 weeks behind on. Food, heat, survival. This is insane, Claire whispered. Yes, probably illegal. Only if we're caught. Definitely immoral. I'm not asking you to commit a crime, Miss Morgan. I'm offering you a job, one that pays extremely well for relatively simple work. She should say no, should get out of this car, walk away, find another job, another solution, maintain what was left of her dignity and self-respect. But dignity didn't pay tuition. Self-respect didn't keep the lights on. Why did you fire me? She asked suddenly. If you were planning to offer me this, why the public humiliation? Something dark crossed his expression. Because Victoria Ashworth needs to believe she won. And because no one will suspect a marriage between us if it appears I barely tolerate you professionally. Victoria, Claire repeated, the name tasting bitter. She set me up. Those emails were fabricated, I know. Victoria has been positioning for a board coup for months. You were collateral damage. He said it without apology, simply stating facts. This solves both our problems. She thinks she's eliminated a threat. Meanwhile, I gain what I actually need. The car pulled to a stop. Claire looked out to see they'd arrived at a building in Tribeca, all glass and steel, and the kind of understated luxury that cost millions. I need an answer, Miss Morgan. If you say no, Reeves will take you wherever you want to go. No judgment, no consequences. But if you say yes, we begin immediately. Claire thought of Tyler, of the promise she'd made at their parents' funeral while rain fell on fresh-turned earth. I'll take care of you. I'll make sure you have everything they wanted for you. She thought of the box of belongings sitting in her apartment, her entire career reduced to objects that fit in 12 inches of cardboard. She thought of the number in her bank account, and the bills stacked on her counter, and the future that had collapsed in a conference room 3 hours ago. I want the advance in my account by Monday morning, she said, her voice steadier than she felt, and a separate clause in the contract guaranteeing you won't interfere with my finding new employment after the 6 months. Jonathan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. Approval, maybe? Or recognition? Done. Anything else? Yes. I need to know this isn't some elaborate setup for something worse. I need your word that at the end of 6 months, I walk away with the money and my life intact. You have my word. He extended his hand across the space between them. Do we have a deal? Claire looked at his hand, long fingers, a watch on his wrist with a dark, complex face that probably cost more than a car, and thought about all the ways this could destroy her, all the ways it already had. Then she thought about Tyler's voice on the phone, asking about tuition. She shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and for a moment that lasted a heartbeat too long, neither of them let go. We have a deal, she said. Jonathan released her hand and opened his door. Good. Reeves will help you with your belongings. You're moving in tonight. Tonight? The announcement goes out tomorrow. My fiancée, Claire Morgan. We'll need to be seen together immediately to sell the story. He paused, one foot already out of the car. And Miss Morgan, when we're in public, call me Jonathan. We're supposedly in love. Then he was gone, striding toward the building's entrance with the confidence of someone who owned everything he touched. Reeves turned in his seat, his expression kind but unreadable. "Don't worry, miss. He's not as cold as he pretends to be." Claire wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. Her phone buzzed. A notification from her bank. Deposit pending, $50,000. She stared at the number, at the solution to her immediate crisis, and wondered what price she'd really just agreed to pay. Through the rain-streaked window, she watched Jonathan disappear into the building. Her future husband, her employer, the man who'd fired her in public and hired her in private for the strangest job she'd ever accept. Claire Morgan took a breath, grabbed her pathetic cardboard box, and followed him inside. The elevator ride to the penthouse took 43 seconds, long enough for Claire to realize she'd just agreed to marry a man whose first name she'd learned 5 minutes ago, long enough to wonder if survival always felt this much like drowning. 1 week into her new life as Jonathan Pierce's fiancée, and Claire still felt like an imposter wearing someone else's skin. The penthouse was all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of space that belonged in architecture magazines rather than actual human habitation. Her guest room, because of course they had separate rooms, this was a business arrangement, was larger than her entire previous apartment. The bed was obscenely comfortable. The shower had 7 different settings. Everything was white and chrome and perfect, sterile as a hospital, and just as welcoming. Jonathan left at 6 every morning. She knew because she heard the quiet click of his door, the soft footfalls in the hallway, the whisper of the elevator. He returned around 11 each night, sometimes later. They'd barely spoken beyond logistical necessities. The contract sat signed on the kitchen counter. The announcement had gone out. Claire Morgan, marketing professional, engaged to Jonathan Pierce, billionaire CEO. The internet had opinions. Most of them weren't kind. It was nearly midnight on Friday when Claire found herself unable to sleep, padding barefoot into the kitchen for water she didn't really want. The city glowed beyond the windows, millions of lights pretending the darkness didn't exist. She'd spent the day researching Jonathan online, falling down a rabbit hole of Forbes articles and business profiles. Self-made billionaire, built Pierce Technologies from a single app into an empire spanning artificial intelligence, data analytics, and corporate solutions. 34 years old, never married, no long-term relationships on record, known for being brilliant, driven, and colder than liquid nitrogen. The articles never mentioned his family. She'd found that curious. Can't sleep? Claire spun, water sloshing over the rim of her glass. Jonathan stood in the doorway to the terrace, still in his work clothes, though he'd loosened his tie. A tumbler of amber liquid dangled from one hand. "I didn't know you were home," she said, hating how her heart had jumped at his sudden appearance. "I'm usually not." He moved into the kitchen, keeping a careful distance, always careful not to crowd her. "But tomorrow's the engagement party. Thought I should be well rested for the performance." Right, the engagement party. 200 guests at some gallery in Chelsea, all there to scrutinize the woman who'd somehow captured the uncapturable Jonathan Pierce. About that, Claire started, then stopped, unsure how to voice the question that had been eating at her for days. Say it. It wasn't quite a command, more like permission. "Why did you really choose me? And don't say it's because I'm honest. Half of Manhattan is honest. You could have picked anyone." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, studying his drink like it had answers. When he finally looked at her, something in his expression had shifted, a crack in the armor she hadn't expected. "Because you needed the money too much to fall in love with me." The honesty of it stole her breath. No pretense, no corporate doublespeak, just truth, raw and unvarnished. "That's depressingly pragmatic," she said. "I'm a depressingly pragmatic person." He moved to the windows, staring out at the city he'd conquered. "Victoria Ashworth. You asked about her in the car. I didn't give you the full picture." Claire waited, sensing this was important, that whatever he was about to say, he didn't say often. "She was my fiancée 5 years ago. Our engagement lasted 8 months. He paused, jaw tightening. "Her father, Harrison Ashworth, is my father's business partner, has been for 30 years. Victoria and I grew up in the same social circle. When I started Pierce Technologies, her father was my first major investor. And the engagement was expected, arranged, though no one used that word. I was 29, building a company, needed capital and connections. Victoria was beautiful, intelligent, understood the world I was trying to break into. He took a drink, the movement sharp. I thought I could make it work. Thought maybe affection was enough. That love was a luxury people like me didn't need. What happened? I realized I was building a prison instead of a life. Called it off 3 weeks before the wedding. Victoria's never forgiven me. Her father pulled his investment, started working to undermine everything I'd built. The hostile takeover attempt? That's Harrison Ashworth leading the charge. And Victoria took the VP position at my company specifically to stay close, to wait for an opportunity. Claire absorbed this, puzzle pieces clicking into place. So when you announced our engagement, I declared war on both of them. His smile was razor sharp, and I used you as the weapon. I'm not apologizing for that. You agreed to the terms, but you deserve to know what you're walking into tomorrow night. The weight of it settled over her like snow. She wasn't just playing a role. She was a strategic move in a game that had been playing out for years. Your family, Claire said slowly. They'll be at the party? Something dark crossed his face. No, my family doesn't attend my events. We've been estranged for 12 years. Why? Because I chose to build something myself rather than inherit their empire. My father said I'd fail within a year, that I didn't have what it took, that I was... He stopped, the words catching on something painful. It doesn't matter. I proved him wrong, but he's never forgiven me for that either. Claire thought of her own parents, of the years she'd had them, the love that had filled their modest home. Jonathan had grown up with money and privilege, and none of the things that actually mattered. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Why? You gained from my dysfunction. $50,000 worth of sympathy seems excessive. I'm not sympathizing with your bank account. I'm sympathizing with the fact that your family should have loved you and didn't. The silence that followed felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin. Jonathan's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to name, finally settling on something that might have been surprise. You should get some sleep, he said, his voice rougher than before. Tomorrow will be exhausting. Smile, nod, let me do most of the talking. Victoria will try to provoke you. Don't take the bait. I can handle Victoria. I know. But I'd prefer you didn't have to. He moved toward the hallway, then paused. Claire, thank you for listening. I don't usually... He stopped again, seeming to struggle with words that didn't come naturally. Just thank you. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the cavernous kitchen with the strange ache in her chest she had no right to feel. The next evening arrived too quickly and not fast enough. Claire stood in her room, staring at the woman in the mirror who looked like her, but couldn't possibly be. The dress had arrived that afternoon, delivered by a personal stylist Jonathan had hired. Midnight blue silk that clung and flowed in equal measure, elegant without being ostentatious. Diamonds at her throat and ears, borrowed, the stylist had said, though Claire suspected they were worth more than her entire previous life. Her auburn hair had been styled into soft waves. Her makeup was understated but flawless. She looked expensive. She looked like she belonged on Jonathan Pierce's arm. She looked like a beautiful lie. A knock at her door. The car's here, Jonathan's voice, muffled through wood. Claire took a breath, steadied herself, and opened the door. Jonathan stood in the hallway in a tuxedo that made her forget how to process oxygen. He'd always been handsome, in that sharp, dangerous way, but this was different. This was devastating. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his steel-gray eyes tracking over her appearance with an intensity that made her skin heat. You look, he stopped, something flickering in his expression. That dress is perfect. Your stylist has good taste. I chose it. The admission came quiet, almost reluctant. The color, it matches your eyes. Before Claire could process that, Before she could examine why her heart had just done something complicated in her chest, Jonathan extended his arm. Ready to convince 200 people we're desperately in love? Claire slipped her hand through his elbow, felt the warmth of him through expensive fabric. As I'll ever be. The gallery was already crowded when they arrived, champagne flowing and conversation humming beneath carefully curated ambient music. Every head turned when they entered. Claire felt the weight of 200 gazes, assessing, judging, calculating her worth. Jonathan's hand found the small of her back, warm and steady. "Breathe," he murmured against her ear, so quiet only she could hear. "You're doing fine." They moved through the crowd, Jonathan introducing her to a blur of faces and names she'd never remember. Business associates, investors, friends who felt more like strategic relationships. Everyone smiled. Everyone congratulated them. Everyone's eyes held questions they were too polite to ask. Then Victoria appeared. She wore crimson, a deliberate contrast to Claire's blue. Her platinum hair was down tonight, softening features that were still sharp as knives. She looked beautiful and dangerous, a rose made of razors. "Jonathan," she purred, air-kissing near his cheek without making contact. "What a lovely surprise. And Claire, you look different. The dress is doing wonders." "Victoria," Jonathan said, his voice pleasant and absolutely devoid of warmth. "Congratulations on the Spencer account. I heard you personally closed that deal." Translation: "I know you've been making moves. I'm watching." Victoria's smile never wavered. One does what one must in challenging times. Her gaze slid to Claire, assessing. "I have to ask, how did this happen? You and Jonathan? It's all so sudden." "Sometimes the best things are," Claire said, surprised by how steady her voice came out. "Indeed. Though I have to wonder, did he tell you about Westfield University?" Claire's blood went cold. Beside her, Jonathan went very still. "What about it?" Claire asked, though she could already feel the trap closing. Victoria's smile sharpened. "Jonathan acquired it 6 months ago. Bought the whole institution. Didn't you mention your brother attends there? Small world." The gallery tilted. 6 months ago, before the firing, before the proposal, Jonathan had owned Tyler's college the entire time. Claire turned to look at him, saw the truth written in his expression. He'd known. When he made his offer, when he'd calculated exactly how desperate she was, he'd already held Tyler's future in his hands. "We should circulate," Jonathan said tightly, his hand pressing more firmly against her back. But Claire couldn't move. All she could think was that this arrangement wasn't a lifeline. It was a leash, and she'd willingly put it around her own neck. The car ride back to the penthouse was suffocating in its silence. Jonathan sat across from her, his expression carved from stone, while Manhattan blurred past the windows in streaks of light and shadow. Claire's hands were folded in her lap, the borrowed diamonds at her throat feeling less like jewelry and more like a collar. Reeves, bless him, kept his eyes on the road and said nothing. It wasn't until they were inside the penthouse, the door closing with its soft, expensive click, that Claire finally turned to face him. 6 months, she said, her voice shaking with something between fury and betrayal. "You've owned Tyler's University for 6 months." Jonathan loosened his tie with sharp, precise movements. "I acquire companies, educational institutions, tech startups, real estate portfolios. It's what I do. Westfield was a sound investment." "Don't." The word came out harder than she'd intended. "Don't treat me like I'm stupid. You knew exactly what leverage you had when you made that offer." He went still, then turned to face her fully. In the low light of the penthouse, his eyes looked darker, stormy. "Yes, I knew." The admission landed like a slap. Part of her had hoped he'd deny it, soften it somehow. But Jonathan Pierce didn't deal in comfortable lives. "So what does that make me?" Claire demanded. "An employee? A hostage?" "A solution." His voice was cold, clinical. "I had a problem. You had a problem. I used the resources available to solve both. That's business. That's manipulation. It's strategy. And you agreed. No one forced you into that car, Claire. He was right. She hated that he was right. She'd made her choice, with open eyes, had weighed her options, and picked survival over pride. But knowing she'd been more trapped than she'd realized, that the rope around her neck had been there all along, invisible but no less real. I need air, she said, moving past him toward the terrace. His hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. Claire, don't. She pulled away, not looking at him. Just don't. The November wind bit at her bare shoulders when she stepped outside, but she welcomed the cold. Anything to clear her head, to quiet the voice whispering that she'd sold herself more thoroughly than she'd understood. She heard the door open behind her, then close. Jonathan's jacket settled over her shoulders, still warm from his body, carrying that scent of cedar and something darker she couldn't name. I'm not sorry, he said quietly, standing beside her at the railing. I should be. A better man would be. But I needed you, and I used what I had to get you. Claire laughed, the sound bitter. That's your defense? Honesty about but being ruthless? It's all I have. He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. My father built his empire by pretending to be honorable while stabbing people in the back. I watched him smile at business partners before destroying them. At least I'm honest about what I am. And what's that? Desperate. The word came out raw, unguarded. The takeover attempt isn't just business, Claire. Harrison Ashworth, Victoria's father, he and my father have been planning this for 2 years, ever since I refused to come back to the family company. This is personal. They want to prove I'm nothing without the Pierce name, that everything I've built is worthless. Claire turned to look at him. In profile, with the city lights casting shadows across his face, he looked younger, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. This wedding, he continued, this appearance of stability, it's the only ammunition I have left. The board wants someone settled, someone who looks like he has a life outside the office, someone who won't crack under pressure. His jaw tightened. I'm asking you to help me prove them wrong. By lying? By surviving? He finally looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. We're both doing whatever it takes to survive. You for Tyler, me for everything I've built. That doesn't make us villains. It makes us human. The worst part was that she understood. Standing there in his jacket, smelling his cologne, watching the man behind the armor crack just enough to show his wounds, she understood completely. I'm still angry, she said. You should be. I'd be suspicious if you weren't. Something almost like a smile ghosted across his face. For what it's worth, Tyler's scholarship was never in danger. I wouldn't weaponize a 19-year-old kid's education. I'm ruthless, not cruel. There's a difference? I'd like to think so. They stood there in the cold, the city breathing around them, and something in the air shifted. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. Two people trapped in circumstances neither had chosen, playing the hands they'd been dealt. I wanted to open a bookstore, Claire said suddenly, surprising herself. Before everything fell apart with my parents, I had this whole plan. Cozy space, coffee bar, author events, somewhere people could just exist without pressure, without having to be anything other than themselves. Why didn't you? Because Tyler needed to eat, because medical bills don't care about dreams, because surviving doesn't leave much room for living. She pulled his jacket tighter around herself. What about you? If you could do anything other than what you're doing? Jonathan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I don't know. I've been fighting for so long. To prove my father wrong, to build something that matters. I'm not sure who I'd be without the war. The honesty of it ached. Claire found herself stepping closer, drawn by the rawness in his voice. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, she said softly. Probably. He looked down at her, something unreadable in his expression. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone easier to keep at a distance. The words hung between them, charged with meaning she wasn't ready to examine. The space separating them felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Claire was acutely aware of his height, the breadth of his shoulders, the way the city lights caught in his eyes. Jonathan's hand came up slowly, as if he were giving her time to move away. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, feather-light, questioning. "This isn't part of the contract," he murmured. "I know," she breathed. He leaned in, his forehead almost touching hers. She could feel his breath against her lips, warm in the November cold. Her heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. His phone shattered the moment with a harsh buzz. Jonathan pulled back sharply, the spell broken. He yanked the phone from his pocket, his expression hardening as he read the screen. "My mother," he said flatly, "confirming our attendance at the family Thanksgiving gathering next week." Claire's mind reeled from the emotional whiplash. "Your family? I thought you were estranged." "We are, but my engagement apparently warrants a reconciliation attempt." His voice dripped with sarcasm. 3 days at the Pierce estate in Connecticut, my parents, my sister, various aunts and uncles, all of them eager to meet the woman who supposedly tamed me. That wasn't part of our agreement. No, it wasn't. He looked at her then, and she saw calculation warring with something else in his expression. "I'll add another $100,000 to your contract, and I'll endow a scholarship at Westfield, in your parents' names. Full ride for underprivileged students pursuing literature or education." The offer hit her like a physical blow. Her parents, her father who'd taught high school English, her mother who'd volunteered at the library every weekend, immortalized in something that mattered. Students who'd struggled like they had, given chances they'd fought to provide for their own children. Why that? Her voice came out thick. Why something that actually means something? Jonathan's expression softened in a way she'd never seen. "Because I need you to be convincing at that gathering, and you won't be unless you stop hating me quite so much." He was manipulating her again. She knew it. Knew he'd researched her, found the exact pressure point that would make her agree. But the scholarship was real. The money would help real students. And maybe, just maybe, there was something else beneath the calculation. Something that wanted to give her this not just as a bribe, but as an apology he didn't know how to voice. "One condition," Claire said. "You're honest with me from now on. No more surprises. If I'm walking into something, I deserve to know what it is." Agreed. He extended his hand, formal, despite everything that had almost happened moments ago. "Partners?" Claire looked at his hand, then at his face, saw the walls rebuilding, the armor sliding back into place. But now she'd seen what was underneath. Now she knew the man behind the ruthlessness. She took his hand. "Partners." His grip was warm, firm, and lingered a heartbeat too long before he released her. "We leave Friday morning," he said. "Pack for a week. Connecticut in November is cold, and my family is colder. Fair warning, they're going to try to break you, humiliate you, make you feel like you're not good enough. I can handle it." "I know, but I won't let them." The words came fierce, protective. "Whatever happens in that house, we're a team. Understand?" Claire nodded, something warm unfurling in her chest despite her better judgment. "Get some sleep," Jonathan said, stepping back, creating distance. "Tomorrow, we'll work on our story. How we met, when I proposed, all the lies we'll need to tell convincingly." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Claire, the bookstore. When this is over, when you have your money, open it. Don't let survival kill all your dreams." Then he was gone, leaving her alone on the terrace with his jacket around her shoulders and her heart doing complicated things it absolutely should not be doing for a man who'd admitted to manipulating her. But as she looked out at the city, at the millions of lights representing millions of lives and dreams and struggles, Claire realized something terrifying. She was starting to understand Jonathan Pierce. And understanding, she feared, was dangerously close to something else entirely. The Pierce estate materialized through the fog like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and ivy and windows that caught the weak November sunlight like accusations. Claire pressed her face closer to the car window as Reeves navigated the long, winding driveway, her breath fogging the glass. "It looks like somewhere people get murdered in detective novels," she said. Beside her, Jonathan's laugh was short and sharp. "That's one way to describe my childhood home." The mansion loomed larger as they approached, 3 stories of old money and older grudges. Manicured lawns stretched toward the horizon despite the season, maintained by staff Claire would probably never see. The building itself was stone and arrogance, perched on the Connecticut landscape like it had conquered rather than been built upon it. Jonathan's posture had changed the moment they'd crossed the state line. The walls had slammed up, his shoulders rigid, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. He'd barely spoken for the last hour, just stared out his own window like a soldier approaching enemy territory. Because that's what this was, Claire realized, a battlefield dressed up as a family gathering. The car stopped. Before Claire could reach for her door, Jonathan's hand found hers, gripping tight. "Whatever happens in there," he said, his voice low and urgent, "remember it's an act. Nothing they say is true. They'll try to make you doubt yourself, doubt us. Don't let them. Jonathan, promise me." She looked at him, saw something almost like fear in his eyes, and squeezed his hand back. "I promise." Staff appeared to collect their luggage. The front door opened, and a woman descended the stone steps with the bearing of a queen inspecting peasants. Constance Pierce was 62 years old and looked like she'd been carved from ice and aristocracy. Platinum hair swept back in a style that hadn't changed since the 80s. Diamonds at her throat and wrists, understated but unmistakably real. Her dress was tasteful, expensive, and designed to make anyone in less than designer feel inadequate. It worked. "Jonathan." She air-kissed near his cheek, close enough for propriety, far enough to avoid actual contact. "You're late. Mother, this is Claire Morgan, my fiancé." Constance's gaze swept over Claire with the efficiency of an accountant cataloging assets. "So you're the girl." Not woman, not fiancé, girl. The word landed like a slap, perfectly calculated to diminish. "Mrs. Pierce," Claire said, extending her hand with more confidence than she felt. Constance's handshake was brief, cold, and over too quickly. "Yes, well, come inside. Your father is waiting in the library, Jonathan. He'll want to speak with you before dinner." The interior of the house matched the exterior, grand, imposing, and utterly devoid of warmth. Crown molding and marble floors and oil paintings of Pierce ancestors staring down with judgmental eyes. Everything was perfect. Nothing was loved. "I'll show Claire to our room," Jonathan said, his hand finding the small of her back. "Mrs. Henley has prepared Jonathan's childhood bedroom for you both," Constance said, already walking away. "I trust you'll find it adequate." The bedroom was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a hallway lined west with family portraits. Claire noticed immediately that recent photos were sparse, and Jonathan appeared in none of them, as if he'd been erased from the family narrative the moment he'd left. The room itself was strange, clearly expensive, clearly maintained, but stripped of personality. A large bed dominated the space, but there were no trophies, no photographs, no evidence that a child had ever actually lived here. "They removed everything after I left," Jonathan said quietly, answering her unspoken question. "My mother doesn't believe in dwelling on disappointment." Claire's heart cracked a little. She turned to him, saw him standing rigid in the doorway of his own childhood bedroom, like an intruder. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. I chose this." He moved to the window, staring out at the grounds. "I should go see my father, get the first interrogation over with." "Do you want me to come?" "No. He'll want to establish dominance first. See if he can intimidate me alone before bringing you into it." Jonathan's smile was razor-sharp, standard Pierce family tactics, divide and conquer. After he left, Claire unpacked slowly, trying to absorb the strangeness of this place. This was where Jonathan had grown up. These cold halls, these disapproving portraits, this absence of love disguised as good breeding. No wonder he'd learned to build walls. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A young woman stood in the hallway, beautiful in that careless way that came from good genes and better money. Honey blonde hair, sharp green eyes, and a smile that didn't reach anywhere genuine. "You must be Claire," she said, sweeping in without invitation. "I'm Vanessa, Jonathan's sister, the one he actually likes when he remembers we exist." There was barbed wire wrapped around every word, delivered with a laugh that made it impossible to call out the cruelty directly. "It's nice to meet you," Claire said carefully. "Is it?" Vanessa perched on the edge of the bed like she owned it, which technically she probably did. "I have to say, you're not what I expected. Johnny usually goes for the Victorian type, polished, connected, someone who understands our world." There it was, the first cut, surgical and precise. "I understand Jonathan's world just fine," Claire said evenly. "Do you? That's sweet." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "Did he tell you about the psychological evaluation? After he broke off the engagement with Victoria, Daddy was so concerned about his mental state. Had him evaluated by the best psychiatrist money could buy." Claire's stomach dropped. "That's private." "Nothing's private in this family." The diagnosis was fascinating. Attachment disorder. Incapable of forming genuine emotional bonds. The doctor said Jonathan approaches relationships like business transactions, cost-benefit analysis instead of feelings. She stood, smoothing her designer dress. "Just thought you should know what you're marrying. Dinner's at 7. Try not to be late." Then she was gone, leaving poison in her wake. Claire sank onto the bed, Vanessa's words echoing. Attachment disorder. Business transactions. She thought of the contract, the calculated way Jonathan had offered her exactly what she needed, the clinical precision of their arrangement. Was any of it real? The moments on the terrace, the almost kiss, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered? Was it all just another performance? She was still sitting there, drowning in doubt, when Jonathan returned. He took one look at her face and went still. "What happened?" "Your sister stopped by. She told me about the evaluation, the diagnosis." Something dark crossed his expression. Of course she did. "Is it true? Attachment disorder?" "It's bullshit." He moved to the window, shoulders rigid. "My father paid a doctor to write whatever would justify why I didn't want to marry Victoria, why I didn't want to be what they wanted me to be. He needed a medical reason because he couldn't accept that I simply didn't love her." "But what if it's true?" Claire stood, needing him to look at her. "What if you really can't, feel things? Form connections?" He turned, and the raw pain in his eyes stole her breath. "You think I don't know what I am? I've spent my whole life being told I'm broken, too cold, too distant, incapable of love. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am exactly what they say." "Jonathan, but I know this." He crossed to her, intense and desperate. "Whatever I'm capable of feeling, I feel it with you. When Victoria told you about Westfield, I wanted to destroy her for hurting you. When you stood on that terrace and told me about your bookstore, I wanted to give you that dream more than I've wanted anything. When I almost kissed you—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "That wasn't calculation. That wasn't strategy. That was me, terrified and wanting something I have no right to want." Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this stopped being fake somewhere between the contract and Connecticut. I'm saying I don't know how to do this, how to be what you deserve, but I'm trying." His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything his family said about him. "I'm saying they're going to spend this weekend trying to break us apart. And I need you to know that whatever they say about me, whatever doubts they plant, this is real. You're real." The space between them had disappeared. Claire could. He'd feel his breath, see the darker flecks of navy in his gray eyes, sense the barely contained intensity radiating from him like heat. "We should go to dinner," she whispered, even as her body swayed toward his. "We should." But he didn't move. Neither did she. The dinner bell chimed somewhere below, shattering the moment. Jonathan stepped back, the armor sliding back into place with visible effort. "Ready to meet the rest of them?" Claire straightened her dress, trying to calm her racing pulse. "As I'll ever be." He offered his arm, formal and distant again. But when she took it, his hand covered hers, warm and steady. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here, for believing me." "Don't thank me yet," Claire said as they descended toward the dining room. "We still have to survive the next 3 days." The dining room was exactly as oppressive as she'd expected. A table that could seat 20, set with china that probably cost more than a car. Richard Pierce sat at the head like a king holding court. Silver hair, cold blue eyes, a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't set in permanent disapproval. He didn't stand when they entered. Jonathan, still playing at being a businessman, I see. His gaze flicked to Claire, dismissive. "And this is the girl who finally got you to settle down. How quaint." Claire felt Jonathan tense beside her, but his voice came out smooth as silk. "Father, always a pleasure. Claire, my father, Richard Pierce. Father, my fiancée, Claire Morgan." "Morgan," Richard repeated, as if tasting how the name tasted. "What's your family background, dear? I don't believe I've heard of any Connecticut Morgans. What makes you think you're good enough for my son?" "My family was from upstate New York," Claire said, keeping her voice steady. "My father taught high school English. My mother was a librarian. They died 3 years ago." "I see. Public sector. How noble." The word dripped with condescension. "And now you're marrying into one of the oldest families in New England. Quite the step up." Beside her, Jonathan's hand tightened on hers, a warning that this was only beginning. Dinner was a masterclass in subtle cruelty. Between courses of food too artfully arranged to enjoy, the Pierce family dissected Claire's life with surgical precision. Vanessa asked pointed questions about her education. State university, how practical. While Constance made observations about her dress that sounded like compliments but landed like insults. Richard said little, but his silence was its own condemnation, a reminder that she wasn't worth his words. Jonathan sat rigid beside her, his hand finding hers beneath the table, squeezing tight enough to hurt. A lifeline or a warning? She couldn't tell. It wasn't until dessert arrived, some architectural creation of chocolate and gold leaf, that Vanessa delivered the killing blow. "Oh, Jonathan, I've been meaning to ask, did you ever get those photos from your birthday party last year? Mother had them all digitized. Such lovely memories." Before Jonathan could respond, Vanessa was scrolling through her phone with the casual cruelty of someone who knew exactly what damage she was about to inflict. "Here we are, the whole family together. Well, almost the whole family. You'd already left by then, Johnny." She passed the phone to Claire. The screen showed a party at this very estate. Elegant people in elegant clothes, champagne and fake smiles. And there, in multiple photos, looking radiant and at home, was Victoria Ashworth, laughing with Constance, chatting with Richard, belonging in a way Claire never would. Vanessa continued, her voice honey-sweet and laced with poison. "We all thought she and Jonathan were so perfect together, didn't we, Mother?" "They understood each other," Constance said, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. "Same background, same values, same world. It was a shame things didn't work out." Claire felt Jonathan go absolutely still beside her. "That was 5 years ago," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Was it? Time flies." Richard spoke for the first time in 20 minutes, his gaze fixed on Jonathan with something like satisfaction. "Though I have to say, son, this engagement feels rather sudden, almost desperate. Is everything all right with the company? There it was, the real attack. Not on Claire, but on Jonathan, using her as the weapon. Pierce Technologies is thriving, Jonathan said evenly. Is it? Because I heard the board's been restless, questioning your leadership, worried about stability. Richard leaned back in his chair, a predator sensing blood. Funny how you suddenly got engaged right when the merger vote was approaching. Almost like you needed to appear settled, responsible. Like this is all just a performance to save your company. The accuracy of it stole Claire's breath. Because that's exactly what it was. A performance, a transaction, everything his family accused them of being. Vanessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her smile turned nuclear. Oh, this is interesting. Jonathan, did you know your engagement made the business section? There's a whole article speculating about whether this marriage is a strategic move to stabilize the company before the hostile takeover vote. She read from her screen. Sources close to Pierce suggest the engagement to unknown marketing professional Claire Morgan may be less a love story and more a calculated business decision. Pierce has historically kept his personal life private, making this sudden public relationship raise questions about authenticity and motivation. The silence that followed was deafening. Claire felt something inside her crystallize, not hurt, but anger, cold, clarifying rage. These people had spent 2 hours trying to make her feel small, inadequate, like she didn't belong. And maybe she didn't. Maybe this whole thing was fake, but she'd be damned if she'd let them see her break. You're right, she said, clearly, looking directly at Richard. This engagement is strategic. Jonathan's hand tightened on hers in warning, but she continued. Jonathan needed someone who wouldn't be intimidated by his world, who wouldn't care about his money or his name or his family's approval. Someone who could stand beside him and not flinch when people tried to tear her down. She smiled, sharp as a knife. And I needed someone who saw value in me beyond my background, who didn't judge me for working-class parents or state university or the fact that I don't know which fork to use for which course. We're using each other. You're absolutely right about that. The question is, why does it bother you so much? Richard's expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. The answer, Claire continued, is because he did it without you, built a company without you, chose a wife without you, and now he's winning, and you can't stand it. So you're trying to poison this because if you can't control him, you'd rather see him fail. How dare you? Constance started. I dare because I have nothing to lose, Claire cut her off. You've already decided I'm not good enough, so I might as well tell the truth. This family tried to break Jonathan, made him think he was incapable of love because he wouldn't love the way you demanded. But he's not broken. You are, and I won't sit here and let you convince him otherwise. The room erupted. Vanessa's shocked gasp, Constance's outraged protests, Richard's cold fury. But through it all, Claire felt Jonathan's hand in hers, trembling slightly, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. We're leaving, Jonathan said, standing abruptly, pulling Claire with him. Sit down, Richard commanded. We're not finished. Yes, we are. We've been finished for 12 years. I was just too stubborn to accept it. Jonathan's voice was steel wrapped in ice. Claire's right. You wanted me to fail, needed me to. Because if I succeed without you, what does that say about everything you built, everything you are? Jonathan, Constance tried, but he was already moving, pulling Claire toward the door. They didn't stop until they reached the gardens, cold November air hitting them like a slap. Claire's breath came in gasps, adrenaline and fury, and something like exhilaration coursing through her veins. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have. Jonathan spun her around, his hands framing her face, and kissed her. Not the careful, almost kiss from the terrace, not a performance for an audience. This was desperate and real, and tasted like freedom. His mouth moved against hers with an urgency that spoke of years of restraint breaking, walls crumbling, everything they'd been pretending not to feel exploding into something undeniable. Claire kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He responded by walking her backward until her back hit cold stone, the garden wall solid against her spine, Jonathan solid against her front. "You defended me," he breathed against her lips between kisses. "You stood up to them." "They were horrible," she gasped, as his mouth traced her jaw, her neck. Someone needed to say it. "I'm done pretending." His forehead pressed against hers, both of them breathing hard. "This, us, I'm done pretending it's not real." "Jonathan, I know. I broke the contract, I crossed the line. Sue me." His laugh was shaky, vulnerable. "But I can't do this anymore. Can't stand next to you and pretend I don't want to touch you. Can't watch you be brilliant and brave and not want to tell everyone you're mine." Claire's heart hammered, so hard she thought it might break her ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I care about you, more than I've cared about anything. More than the company, more than proving my father wrong, more than—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with words that didn't come naturally. "I think I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me, but not as much as the thought of losing you." The words hung in the cold air between them, more honest than anything he'd ever said. "We have a contract," Claire whispered, even as her body betrayed her by pressing closer to his warmth. "Then we'll burn it, void it. I'll pay you everything I promised and more. But I can't." His voice broke slightly. "I can't keep pretending this is just business." Claire looked at him, really looked, saw past the armor and the strategy to the man underneath, the one who'd been told his whole life he was incapable of love, who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in, who was now standing in his family's garden, asking her to believe in something neither of them had planned for. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I. This could destroy everything." "I know." His thumb traced her cheekbone, achingly gentle. "But you make me want to be brave, want to try, even if I fail." Pulled him down into another kiss, softer this time, but no less meaningful, an answer written in touch instead of words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jonathan pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Claire asked. "Calling Reeves. We're leaving. Tonight." "But the weekend is over. I don't need their approval. Don't want it. The only thing I need is standing in front of me." He made the call, brief and efficient, then pocketed the phone. "Pack light. We'll send for the rest tomorrow." They moved through the house like thieves, gathering essentials while avoiding the dining room where his family likely still sat. Claire could hear raised voices, arguments about what had just happened, but they sounded distant, unimportant. In the car, with Reeves driving them back toward Manhattan and sanity, Jonathan pulled Claire close. She went willingly, tucking into his side, his arm around her shoulders, solid and warm. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "I don't know. I've never done this before, wanted something more than I wanted to win." His fingers traced patterns on her arm. "But tomorrow, I want to take you to City Hall, make this real. Not because of a contract or a merger or my family, because I want to marry you, actually marry you, if you'll have me." Claire thought of everything that had led to this moment, the firing, the desperate agreement, the fake engagement that had become terrifyingly real. She should be cautious, should protect herself, should remember this started as a transaction. But when she looked at Jonathan, at the man who'd been called incapable of love learning how to feel, the billionaire who'd chosen her over his empire, the strategist who'd finally stopped calculating, she realized something. Maybe love didn't have to start perfect to end up real. "Yes," she said simply. "Tomorrow, City Hall, let's do it." His smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. He kissed her forehead, her temple, finally her mouth, soft and reverent. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing past what they said I was, for believing I could be more." Claire settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and sure. Outside, the highway stretched toward home, toward tomorrow, toward a future neither of them had planned, but both were choosing. The merger vote could wait, his family could disapprove, the world could speculate all it wanted. For now, in this car, in this moment, they were simply two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their own survival. And that, Claire thought as sleep pulled at her, was more than enough. City Hall on a cold December morning was decidedly unromantic. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, and a bored clerk who'd clearly processed 100 marriages and didn't find theirs particularly special. But when Jonathan slipped a ring onto Claire's finger, not the simple gold band from the contract, but a vintage sapphire that caught the harsh light like captured starlight, her breath caught. "This wasn't in the contract," she whispered. "No," his voice was low, meant only for her. "It was my grandmother's, the only person in my family who ever believed I was capable of love. I want you to have it." The ceremony took 7 minutes. The kiss that sealed it lasted longer, Jonathan's hands gentle on her face, the clerk clearing her throat twice before they finally broke apart. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Pierce," the clerk said, entirely unimpressed by the fact that she'd just married off a billionaire. In the car, Reeves met Claire's eyes in the rearview mirror with something that might have been approval. "Congratulations, Mrs. Pierce. Shall I take you both home?" Home. The penthouse that had felt like a cage 2 weeks ago, but now felt like possibility. "Actually," Jonathan said, checking his phone with a frown, "I need to go to the office. The board called an emergency meeting. The merger vote—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "It's happening today, earlier than scheduled." Claire's stomach dropped. "I thought we had another week." "So did I. My father's moving faster than anticipated." He looked at her, conflict written across his face. "I'm sorry. I know we should. This should be different, better. Not a wedding followed immediately by corporate warfare." "Go," Claire said, squeezing his hand. "Win your company. I'll be here when you're done." The kiss he gave her was quick but fierce. Then he was gone, leaving Claire alone in the back of the car with Reeves and a wedding ring that felt heavier than it should. "He loves you, you know," Reeves said quietly. "He told me he might be falling in love with me. That's not the same thing." For a man like Mr. Pierce, admitting he might feel something is the same as another man shouting it from rooftops. He doesn't know how to do this, but he's trying. That should count for something. Claire twisted the sapphire ring on her finger and hoped Reeves was right. The penthouse felt cavernous without Jonathan. Claire wandered from room to room, still wearing the simple dress she'd chosen for the ceremony, trying to process that she was actually married. Not fake married, not contract married. Really, legally married to a man she'd known for 3 weeks. A man who'd fired her, hired her, manipulated her, protected her, and somewhere in the chaos, made her fall in love with him. The realization hit her like cold water. She was in love with Jonathan Pierce. She was in love with her husband. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Her phone buzzed. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. "Hey sis, you'll never guess what happened. The university just announced a new scholarship program, full ride for students studying education and literature. It's called the Morgan Family Scholarship. Claire, that's us. That's Mom and Dad." Claire's throat tightened. Jonathan had done it. Even in the middle of corporate warfare and family drama and a wedding that shouldn't have been real but was, he'd kept his promise. "That's amazing, Ty." "It gets better. They're naming the new library wing after them, too. How did this happen? Did you—" "I know someone who cares about education," Claire said softly. "Someone who wanted to honor them." After she hung up, she found herself crying. For her parents, for the recognition they'd never know they'd received, for the man who'd understood exactly what would matter to her and made it real. 3 days passed. Jonathan came home late each night, exhausted and tight-lipped about the board meetings. Claire tried not to hover, tried to give him space, but the tension was killing both of them. They slept in the same bed now. That line had been crossed, but sleep was about all they did. Jonathan was too wrapped up in saving his company to be present for anything else. On the 4th day, Claire woke alone, again. A note sat on Jonathan's pillow. Merger vote today. Everything will be decided by tonight. I'm sorry I haven't been here. After this is over, we'll figure out what we are, what we want to be. Jay. The note felt like a goodbye. Claire spent the day trying to distract herself, failing miserably, checking her phone obsessively for updates that never came. By evening, she was climbing the walls. That's when she found the envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a check for $500,000, exactly what the contract had promised, along with documentation for the Morgan Family Scholarship, fully endowed, and a note in Jonathan's precise handwriting. Terms fulfilled ahead of schedule. The merger vote is today. Either way, you saved my company by being exactly who you are. You've earned this and your freedom. I won't hold you to the 6 months when this stopped being about contracts weeks ago. Thank you for everything. You're released from our agreement. Jonathan. Claire stared at the check until the numbers blurred. He was letting her go, paying her off, setting her free. She should be relieved, grateful. This was what she'd signed up for. Money, security, a way out. Tyler's future was secure. The scholarship would help dozens of students. She could open her bookstore, start the life she'd always dreamed of. So why did it feel like her heart was being ripped out? Because he'd given her everything she'd asked for and nothing she actually wanted. She wanted him. The Jonathan who kissed her in gardens and admitted he was scared. The man who'd chosen her over his family's approval. Her husband, in more than just legal paperwork. But he'd decided for both of them that this ended here, that whatever they'd built wasn't worth fighting for beyond corporate necessity. Claire was still staring at the check when her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Morgan, this is Reeves. I'm not supposed to be calling you, but I thought you should know. Mr. Pierce is at the office. The vote just finished. He won. The merger attempt failed. Relief flooded through her. That's wonderful. He's not celebrating. He's sitting alone in his office, staring at nothing. I've known that boy since he was 22 years old, and I've never seen him look so lost. Reeves paused. I don't know what happened between you two, but he needs you, whether he knows it or not. After hanging up, Claire stood in the kitchen of the penthouse that had become home, holding a check that represented freedom, and made a choice. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. She made it 3 steps into the lobby before freezing. Standing by the elevator, looking uncertain and heartbreakingly hopeful, was Miles Chen, the architect from the gallery opening weeks ago, the one who'd given her his card, the one who represented normal and safe and everything her life could have been if she hadn't gotten into Jonathan's car that rainy night. Claire, hi, I've been trying to reach you, but your number changed. He smiled, warm and genuine. I saw the news about your engagement and the wedding. I just wanted to say, if that doesn't work out, if you need anything, I'm still interested. In coffee, in getting to know you, in whatever you want. A month ago, this would have been everything she thought she wanted. A nice man with a normal job offering normal relationship potential. No contracts, no corporate warfare, no families trying to destroy them. Miles, I know the timing is terrible, but I couldn't let you disappear without telling you that I think you're remarkable. And whoever he is, if he doesn't see that, he doesn't deserve you. The kindness in his words made her eyes sting. Thank you, she said softly. Really, but I can't. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Jonathan stepped out, still in his suit from the board meeting, his tie loosened, exhaustion written in every line of his body. He froze when he saw them. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then, Jonathan's expression shuttered completely, walls slamming up so fast, Claire almost heard them lock into place. His gaze moved from Miles to Claire, to the way Miles was standing, too close, too familiar. I'm interrupting, Jonathan said, his voice flat, empty. My apologies. He moved toward the elevator. Wait, Claire started. But Jonathan was faster, stepping into the elevator, his fingers stabbing the close button with barely contained violence. The last thing Claire saw before the door shut was his face, devastated and trying desperately not to show it. Was that your husband? Miles asked carefully. Claire was already moving, running for the stairs because the elevator was gone, and she needed to catch him, needed to explain. She burst into the penthouse 3 flights later, breathing hard, to find Jonathan standing by the windows, staring out at the city like it held answers. "You saw the check?" he said, without turning around. "Yes." "Good. Then you know you're free. You can do whatever you want, see whoever you want." His voice was carefully controlled, but she heard the fracture underneath. "I meant what I said. You saved my company. The board voted to reject the merger after seeing coverage of our wedding. Apparently, watching me defend you at my family's estate convinced them I was capable of caring about something beyond profit margins. You did exactly what I hired you to do. Stop talking like this is a business transaction, isn't it?" He finally turned, and the emptiness in his eyes broke her heart. "I paid you, completed the contract. Now you can go back to your real life. Find someone who knows how to be what you need, someone normal, someone who wasn't diagnosed with an attachment disorder, someone who deserves you. I don't want someone else. I want you, you idiot." He flinched like she'd struck him. "You say that now, but how long until you realize what everyone else already knows? That I'm exactly what my family said, broken, incapable, better at strategy than love." Claire crossed the space between them and kissed him, hard, desperate, trying to communicate everything she didn't have words for. When she pulled back, his eyes were closed, his breathing ragged. "That man in the lobby," she said, "his name is Miles. We met weeks ago, before any of this. He's kind and normal and exactly the type of safe choice I should probably make. And I don't want him. I want the complicated, damaged, brilliant man who married me in City Hall because he was scared of what he was feeling. I want my husband, really, not because of money or contracts or corporate strategy, because somewhere between the firing in Connecticut and this moment, I fell in love with you." Jonathan's eyes opened, shining with something that might have been tears. "You can't. I don't know how. I'll disappoint you, fail you. I've never done this before." "Then we'll figure it out together." She took his face in her hands, made him look at her. "You're not broken, Jonathan. You're scared. There's a difference. And I'm scared too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe with anyone else." His laugh was half sob. "That's the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. Good thing you married me for my honesty, not my poetry." Jonathan pulled her into his arms so fiercely it nearly hurt, his face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking with the force of emotions he'd spent 34 years learning to suppress. "I love you," he said, the words muffled against her neck but clear enough to steal her breath. "I love you, and it terrifies me, and I don't know how to do this, but I love you." Claire held him tighter, her own tears soaking into his expensive shirt. "Say it again. I love you." Clearer this time, stronger. "I love the way you defend people who can't defend themselves. I love that you called my family out on their cruelty. I love that you see past the money and the strategy to whatever's underneath. I love you, Claire. Really, completely, in a way I didn't think I was capable of." Jonathan's eyes opened, shining with something that might have been tears. "You can't. I don't know how. I'll disappoint you, fail you. I've never done this before." "Then we'll figure it out together." She took his face in her hands, made him look at her. "You're not broken, Jonathan. You're scared. There's a difference. And I'm scared too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe with anyone else." His laugh was half sob. "That's the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. Good thing you married me for my honesty, not my poetry." Jonathan pulled her into his arms so fiercely it nearly hurt, his face buried in her hair, his whole body shaking with the force of emotions he'd spent 34 years learning to suppress. "I love you," he said, the words muffled against her neck but clear enough to steal her breath. "I love you, and it terrifies me, and I don't know how to do this, but I love you." Claire held him tighter, her own tears soaking into his expensive shirt. "Say it again. I love you." Clearer this time, stronger. "I love the way you defend people who can't defend themselves. I love that you called my family out on their cruelty. I love that you see past the money and the strategy to whatever's underneath. I love you, Claire. Really, completely, in a way I didn't think I was capable of." She pulled back just enough to see his face, to trace the line of his jaw, to watch the way vulnerability looked on a man who'd built an empire on never showing weakness. "I love you too," she said. "Even though you manipulated me and fired me and paid off my brother's university to trap me. Especially because of that? No, in spite of that. Because you're also the man who kept his promises, who gave my parents a legacy, who learned to be brave when everything in your life taught you to be guarded." Jonathan kissed her then, soft and reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. When he pulled back, his thumb traced her cheekbone, his expression serious. "The check," he said. "I meant what I wrote. You earned that money. I won't take it back just because this became real. I don't want it. Claire, I don't want to be paid for loving you. That's not what this is." She took his hand, pressed it over her heart. "Keep your money. Invest it in the company, donate it. I don't care. What I want is a partnership, real marriage, not a contract. Then what do you want? You, your time, your honesty, your terrible cooking, and your 6 a.m. wake-ups." She smiled through her tears. "I want mornings and arguments and figuring out how to build a life together. That's all." Something in his expression cracked open, raw and honest. "I can do that. I want to do that." He paused, then added quietly, "But I'm stepping back from the CEO position." Claire blinked. "What?" "I'm promoting Victoria's replacement to CEO. I'll stay on as chairman, handle strategy, but I'm done with 18-hour days and sleeping in my office. I built Pierce Technologies to prove my father wrong. Mission accomplished. Now I want to build something else." His hands framed her face, his steel gray eyes intense. "I want to build a life with you, if you'll let me." Jonathan Pierce, voluntarily giving up control? Who are you? Someone trying to be better. For you, for us. His smile was small but genuine. "Besides, I have other priorities now, like helping my wife open a bookstore." Claire's heart stuttered. "What?" "The bookstore, your dream. I want to help you build it. Not buy it for you, I learned that lesson, but support you while you build it yourself." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then showed her the screen. "There's a space 3 blocks from here. Ground floor, good foot traffic, reasonable rent. I may have already scheduled a viewing for tomorrow." "May have?" "Definitely have. And I may have also contacted an architect about renovation possibilities, and researched small business loans, and made a list of local authors who might be interested in events." He looked almost sheepish. "I'm not good at grand gestures that aren't business-related. This is me trying." Claire laughed, the sound caught between joy and disbelief. "You researched small business loans for me?" "I made a spreadsheet, with projections, and 3 different business models, depending on your vision." He grimaced. "I'm aware this is probably not romantic, but it's what I know how to do. Strategy, planning, building foundations for dreams." She kissed him hard and quick. "It's perfect. You're perfect." "I'm really not." "Perfect for me then, my brilliant, strategic, secretly soft husband who shows love through spreadsheets." Jonathan pulled her close, and they stood there in the penthouse that had witnessed their strange journey from transaction to truth, holding each other like they'd discovered something rare and worth protecting. "What happens now?" Claire asked, her ear pressed to his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Now, we sleep. Tomorrow, we look at that storefront. Next week, we figure out what a real marriage looks like when it's not based on contracts and corporate warfare." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And eventually, maybe, we tell your brother that his sister married her former boss in the strangest business deal that ever became a love story. He's going to think I'm insane. You married me. You definitely are." Claire tilted her head back to look at him. "No regrets?" "About 30 per day, but none about you." His expression softened. "Never about you." They made it to the bedroom this time with intention rather than exhaustion, and when Jonathan made love to his wife, really made love, not the careful, restrained touching of 2 people afraid to want too much, it was with a reverence that spoke louder than any declaration. Afterward, tangled in sheets that cost more than furniture, Claire traced patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. both of them existing in that soft space between waking and sleeping where truth came easier. "My grandmother," Jonathan said quietly, "the one whose ring you're wearing, she told me once that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone whose damage fit with yours. Someone who understood brokenness because they'd been broken too." Sounds like a wise woman. She was. She's the only one who came to my college graduation, who called to check on me when I was building the company, who didn't see my independence as betrayal. His arm tightened around Claire. "She would have liked you. The way you don't take my crap, the way you make me want to be more than just successful. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "She left me a letter when she died. I've never told anyone what it said." Claire waited, sensing this was important. "She wrote that I was so busy building walls to keep people out, I'd forgotten how to build doors to let people in. That success without connection was just expensive loneliness. That someday someone would come along who'd make me want to tear down everything I'd built, and when that happened, I shouldn't be afraid." He looked at Claire, his eyes reflecting city lights from the windows. "I think she meant you. She didn't know me. No, but she knew me. Knew I'd find someone who'd make me brave enough to feel." He kissed her forehead, soft and lingering. "Thank you for being that person." Claire fell asleep wrapped in her husband's arms, wearing his grandmother's ring, planning dreams that were finally allowed to be more than survival strategies. 6 months later, Morgan and Pierce Books opened on a Saturday morning in June. The space was everything Claire had imagined and nothing she'd expected. Exposed brick and comfortable chairs, bookshelves built by local craftspeople, a coffee bar that served Tyler's favorite blend. Sunlight streamed through large windows, catching on book spines and making the whole place glow. Jonathan had insisted on being listed as co-owner, despite Claire's protests. "Partners," he'd said firmly, "in business and in life. Besides, someone needs to handle the accounting. Your spreadsheets are terrifying." Tyler had flown in from Westfield for the opening, hurrying, still processing the fact that his sister had married a billionaire and somehow made it work. He stood behind the coffee bar now, chatting easily with customers, completely at home in a way that made Claire's heart ache with happiness. Reeves attended with his wife, a kind woman who hugged Claire like family and told her she'd done the impossible, made Jonathan Pierce smile like he meant it. Even a few former colleagues from Pierce Technologies showed up, the ones who'd been kind during her firing, who'd reached out after the wedding to congratulate her genuinely. Victoria Ashworth did not attend. She'd resigned from Pierce Technologies 3 months prior, finally accepting that her war was over and she'd lost. Claire had heard she'd moved to California, was starting fresh somewhere that didn't hold ghosts of failed engagements and family expectations. Claire hoped she found whatever she was looking for. Jonathan stood near the register, technically helping, but mostly just watching Claire navigate the space she'd built. He'd kept his promise, stepped back from the CEO role, took on advisory positions that let him work reasonable hours, spent his energy on building a life instead of just a company. He was lighter now, smiled more, laughed at terrible jokes, occasionally even beat Claire home from work. "You did it," he said, sliding an arm around her waist as the afternoon crowd thinned. "Your dream, real and thriving." Claire leaned into him, surveying the bookstore filled with people reading and talking and existing in the space she'd created. "We did it. I couldn't have done this without you." "Sure you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." She turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd fired her in front of everyone, and then changed both their lives with an insane proposal. The man who'd learned to love when everyone told him he couldn't. Her husband, her partner, her favorite complication. "Thank you," she said, "for the car ride, for seeing something in me worth investing in, for being brave enough to feel." Jonathan's smile was soft, private, meant only for her. "Thank you," he said, "for getting in the car, for believing I could be more than what my family said, for teaching me that strategy isn't everything. It's something, though." "It's something," he agreed. "But this," he gestured to the bookstore, to the life they'd built, to the space between them that was no longer filled with contracts and conditions, but with something infinitely more valuable. "This is everything." A customer approached with questions about a book club, and Claire excused herself to help. Jonathan watched her go. This woman who'd walked into his life during her worst moment and somehow became his best decision. His phone buzzed. A message from his father, the first in 6 months. Heard about the bookstore. Congratulations. Perhaps we could meet for coffee sometime, if you're willing. Jonathan stared at the message for a long moment. A year ago, he would have ignored it, would have held on to his anger like armor. But Claire had taught him that walls designed to keep pain out also kept healing out. He typed back, "Coffee sounds good. Claire will want to meet you eventually. Fair warning, she doesn't tolerate cruelty, even from family, especially from family." The response came quickly. "I wouldn't expect anything less from the woman who finally made my son happy. How about next Tuesday?" Jonathan pocketed his phone and looked around the bookstore. At Tyler making coffee. At Reeves browsing the mystery section. At Claire laughing with a customer, her whole face bright with joy. At the life he'd built not with strategy or corporate warfare, but with honesty and vulnerability, and the terrifying choice to let someone in. The best stories, Claire had told him once, were the ones you never saw coming, the ones that rewrote your entire ending into a beginning. Standing in a bookstore on a June afternoon, watching his wife build dreams of determination and coffee beans, Jonathan Pierce finally understood what she meant. This wasn't the ending he'd planned. It was so much better. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos. Millions of people chasing success and survival, building empires and barely getting by. All of them searching for something to make the struggle worthwhile. Inside Morgan and Pierce Books, two people who'd started as a desperate transaction had found something neither knew they needed. A partnership built on broken pieces fitting together, on strategy giving way to softness, on love that began in the least likely place and grew into something undeniable. Claire caught Jonathan's eye across the room. She smiled, warm and real, the kind of smile that made his carefully controlled heart do complicated things. He smiled back. This man who'd been told he was incapable of love, who'd built walls tall enough to block out the sun, who'd hired a wife and found a partner instead. The afternoon light shifted, golden and promising, illuminating new beginnings written in old books and fresh coffee, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the best deals were the ones that broke their own contracts. Sometimes getting fired in front of everyone was exactly what you needed. Sometimes saying yes to an insane proposal was the sanest choice you'd ever make. And sometimes love looked like a billionaire researching small business loans and a woman brave enough to believe that broken didn't mean beyond repair. The end.